Hello boys and girls, this is Miss Betsy telling the story this week for Grandma Sheila. So yesterday was Christmas and my oldest daughter, she wasn't able to be home because she had to work, and it was kind of sad not having her here. Because one of the nicest things about the holidays isn't necessarily the presents or all the things that you get to do, but it's spending time with family. Our story today is about a preacher who had been out traveling for quite a while, and he was so excited. It was Christmas Eve and he was heading home for Christmas. He got on the train and he looked around, and there really wasn't any space because there were so many people traveling and trying to go home for Christmas probably too. But there was one seat available. It was right by what looked like a young boy, not much older than 15. So the preacher went over and set down his stuff and settled in and thought, well, I should make conversation. So he commented to the boy about how many people were out traveling for the holidays and everything. But then he noticed that the boy was crying. He looked really upset and was just really sad and had tears on his eyes. And so the preacher kind of felt bad and thought, well, I'll just let the boy have his space. If he wants to talk to me, then he can. So he just sat there looking around, looking outside, watching the snow come down, and was thinking about how it was going to be a white Christmas, and also how it was sad that a young boy would be so sad on Christmas. He wondered what was bothering him. Well, just about this time, the young man wiped his eyes and tried to look around and act like nothing was wrong and that he was okay. So the preacher smiled at him, and the boy tried to smile back. And the boy was like, it looks kind of cold out there. And the preacher was kind of excited, like, oh, this is my opportunity to visit with him. So he says, yeah, it does look cold. And he says, man, I remember when I was a young boy and it would be so cold and I'd have to go out and milk the cows when it was below zero. But he said, I'd always look forward to coming back into the house where we had the fire roaring and it was warm and pleasant. And then he said, sometimes we go through difficult things, but if we have something to look forward to, it makes things all better. And the boy, when he heard this, kind of looked sad and was like, well, yeah, maybe, I guess. Then the preacher felt bad because he thought, well, maybe I said something wrong to upset him. So he was quiet then. And then he told the boy, he says, I probably said something that made you sad, and I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on. But he says, I am a preacher. And if you want to talk to me, that's okay. I don't mind listening, and maybe there's even something that I could do to help with whatever it is that's bothering you. The boy kind of sniffled a little, and he says, yeah, something is bothering me, and I really do want to talk to someone about it. Do you mind listening? The preacher was like, oh no, go ahead, tell me what's going on. So the young man, he said, well, I've been gone from home for over 4 months now. He said, I got discouraged with school, and I got tired of doing chores. He says, my dad has a store that I would help out with, and then we have cows at home, and I'd have to get up early in the morning in the cold and milk the cows. Then I go to school all day, and then I come home and I have to feed and water and milk the cows again, and I have all these chores and things I have to do around the house, and there's nothing fun to do, and so I just got sick of it, and so I decided I was going to leave. So he said, that's what I did. One day I just got on a train and I left home, and I went to the big city. I thought this was going to be fun, but he said I didn't have much money, and I tried to get work. No one would hire me. They just looked at me, and I guess they could tell I was a young boy, and they told me, son, you just need to go home. But I couldn't go home. What would Mom and Dad think? I had left. So I didn't know what to do, but I was so lonely. And finally I met this one boy, and I went home with him and stayed at his house, but his family wasn't like my family, and it just didn't feel right. So I finally got brave, and I wrote a letter home to my dad, and I told him, on this day, which was Christmas Eve, I will be on the train, and I am going to head home. Now, he says, if you don't want me back, you let me know. Now, the young man was afraid to hear from his dad and get a letter that said, don't come home. So he didn't give a forwarding address or anything. He just told him, I want you to leave a sign. And so the boy was getting upset. He told the preacher, he said, you see, we're almost home, and I'm afraid they're not going to want me back. And the preacher says, well, how are you going to know? What's the sign? What are you looking for? How are you going to know? And he said, I told them to leave a little white rag on the apple tree. You see, our house is close enough to the railroad that you can see it from the train, and you can see the apple tree. And he says, now that we're getting close, I am so scared and afraid that there's not going to be a rag there, and that they're not going to want me back home because I was so naughty and I ran away from home. And oh, I don't know what to do. I'm just so scared. The preacher said, oh, it's okay. He says, I can look for you. If you don't want to look, I'll look. And just then the whistle on the train went, and the train started to slow down. And the boy says, oh no, I can't look. We're almost there. I know, we're almost home. Can you look for me, please? So the pastor said, yes, I'll look. And the boy started to just sob and wouldn't look. He wouldn't look out the window. But the pastor, he stretched up and looked, and he's like, oh, look! And he started to laugh, and the pastor started to cry and laugh. And he says, look! He says, there's not just one rag on the tree. The whole tree is lit up with rags. That whole tree was full of over 50 rags that were tied on the tree, white rags that were fluttering in the wind, signaling to that young man that his family wanted him home and wanted him back, and that they had forgiven him for leaving home. You know, boys and girls, sometimes we make bad choices, but I can tell you, your mommy and your daddy will always love you, and that you can always go back and say, I'm sorry, and they will still love you. I'm a mother, and I want my kids to know that they can come home anytime, no matter what choices they have made. And you know what's even greater? We have a Father in heaven that loves us even more than our moms and dads. And he's always got his arms stretched out, waiting for us to come back to him. And even if we make a little mistake here or there, he is willing to accept us back into the fold, and he loves us. So never forget that. Remember this Christmas season that the greatest gift was the gift from Jesus, that he came down and died for our sins, and he's just waiting to spend eternity with each one of us. Thank you for listening to my story. Goodbye.